Hi everyone, this is James versus Pranav, played on the 23rd of February. Let's go. E4, E5, bishop C4, yeah, okay. Oh yeah, it's just a normal Guico piano. Well, not really. What is it? What is this? Knight C3, some sort of weird Vienna thingy? Um, yeah, well, it's book. It seems fine by me. There's no point looking at it because no one's made a mistake yet. D3, that's the main move. Okay. I guess the idea here is to try and go for an f4 advance, whoops, which is not really good with this bishop on this diagonal. H6, okay, so that's to stop bishop g5 pinning the knight. I don't think it's necessary. I don't know, let's look at the opening books. Yeah, d6 and knight c6, just knight out or pawn up, just seem like the two sensible moves to me. H6 does seem like it's too early. It does stop what could be a very annoying pin. That is true. But yeah, I think there are more useful moves that need to be played. Yeah. Then both players playing pretty sensibly, getting their pieces out quickly and castling. Now we've just got some sort of four knights game. Wait, was there a tactic back here? Could we have sacked our knight, or was that just really bad? Oh yeah, because the bishop is on pre. We can't fork trick. Yeah, that doesn't work at all. Okay, so castles, yeah, both players are just fine. What? Huh? Yeah, both players were fine, and then White decided he didn't want to be White anymore. Bishop b5, just wasting a move. Just, the bishop's already developed to c4. Don't move it again. It's just like saying, I don't want to be White. I prefer to be Black. Throwing away the first move advantage by playing a move like bishop b5. Just developing this bishop, maybe. I mean, even stuff like bishop e3 is perfectly fine. Getting this knight off of c3 so you can play c3 and then d4 is also the sort of thing you want to look at. Sometimes knight a4 is possible, to try and just trade the knight for the bishop. Putting the knight on the rim like this is not a good idea. I mean, putting it here is often better. The problem is with the knight sitting there, how are you going to defend this pawn here? And once you get your c3, d4 in. And it also makes something like bishop g4 very uncomfortable because you're threatening just instantly double your pawns. And what do you do? Move the knight again out to here? Maybe you can. But this pin becomes unbearable because like if you do something like this, and the knight can jump into the middle, and the pin is a problem. So yeah, how to play this as White is a bit tricky. You need a plan, but what's the plan? I really do think knight a4 is the way to go. This bishop g4 move is going to be annoying. Maybe h3. This is one of those cases where you do want to keep pieces out of g4, and particularly want to keep this bishop out of here. H3 now is not really a wasted move. It's a good time to play it. Okay, so he played bishop b5. Looking at the position and the fact that White doesn't really have a good plan, you can kind of understand why he's decided to break a principle and move the same piece twice. It is hard to find a plan. I would recommend just looking a bit deeper though. Maybe chucking the knight in the middle instead. I mean, that's pretty standard. You chuck the knight in the middle, then you go c3, d4, which you can't really do with this pawn on pre. Once the d pawn moves, the e pawn's going to be too weak, and you don't want to play stuff like this because it runs into stuff like knight g4 with the bishop. So h3 actually is looking like the move. Okay, bishop b5, wasting a move. Bishop d7, that's fine. I probably would have castled if I was Black here, but there's nothing wrong with it. Okay, bishop e3. If he's going to play bishop e3, he should have played a last move, I think. b6. b6. Whoa. The bishop's outside the pawn chain, I'm a bit concerned that the bishop might get trapped. It's worth considering just retreating the bishop again and just saying, look, you've got this, you got this bishop which I'm going to trap later on, and playing a move like knight e2 and then c3 threatening b4, taking advantage of the fact that these pawns are here. The other option is the fact that these light squares are incredibly weak. Maybe you can maneuver a knight into them somehow. It's tricky to do. Um, jumping the bishop in here, for instance, something like that. It's hard to see how you can take advantage of those squares right now. Okay, knight d5 was played. Yeah, nothing wrong with that. I don't see a problem. And now white decided to go on a massive swap-offs. Got to be careful how you do this. You got to do the right move order. I think taking here first is the right move order, and then maybe chomping on this. The problem with taking on this straight away is your opponent can complicate things by taking like this, and the bishop's on pre and needs to move, and yeah, this a file is annoying. This a pawn is constantly going to be under threat, and if you play moves like a3 later on, he can just trade off his double pawns and pry open the file anyway. Yeah, I think this move order is something I don't like. However, black didn't capitalize on it. I think black playing this is very irritating. This bishop has to move now, and where does it go? Say it goes back to e3, then he can probably munch this off, and then just simply play knight here, for instance. I guess you've got c4, but this position is, I'm actually preferring black's position. White's missing a center pawn and black's missing an a pawn. I'll trade a rook's pawn for a center pawn any day. Center pawns are far more valuable than rook's pawns. The lack of rook pawn actually helps black because it gives him a half open file, and the lack of center pawns hurts white because he's got one less pawn to fight for the center with. You can imagine maybe later on when it's safe, playing something like c6 and starting to chop off some of these center pawns, or using this pawn structure that's pointing towards the king side to start like an f5 thing. The lack of pawn on e4 means that stuff like f5 can be very strong, particularly if you castle king side and do a general pawn storm on the king side. It's going to be a very strong attack for black. So that's the problem with munching that bishop straight away. Taking here would be much better. So he took the bishop, and yeah, black took back like this. So I think that throws away the potential for a huge advantage. And what did white play? White just played bishop back here, and I mean, it's a nice idea to sit in front of the isolated pawn. This bishop looks like it's going to be good, but this knight just has to move, and these bishops are going to get traded off. Instead of retreating, maybe just taking is the way to play. And after bishop takes, you can maybe retreat this knight out of here. With the bishop no longer on this diagonal, that f5 square is starting to look pretty juicy, particularly with a pawn on h6. Because if black castles, you can chuck the knight in here, and you can't chase the knight away because you end up losing the h pawn. Although maybe you can in this situation because the knight's actually trapped after king g7. Queen here, rook there, and the knight's gone. But maybe not jumping it in straight away, but planning to jump it in a bit later on. Okay, so bishop a4 was played, and then knight takes was played. Knight takes, knight d4. I think I prefer knight e7 actually, because the bishops are probably going to get traded off. They don't need to. This pawn can go up to c4, and the queen defends the bishop. That's actually pretty decent. But if takes, then queen takes. This knight's actually quite good. It's causing this pawn a bit of strife. This pawn structure is quite okay for black. Black could even maybe play knight here and jump into there later if this knight decides to go walkabout. But with the pawn structure like this, you've got play down the b file. You just need to castle, chuck your rook on the b file, and then start ramming this a pawn down white's throat. Or pile enormous pressure on this b file by doubling rooks and things. Wait for the weakness b3 to get played, and then ram this pawn down his throat. Okay, but by chucking the knight into d4, the pawn structure gets changed dramatically. After takes, knight takes. How does black take back? I think he has to take back like this, opening the e file and running straight into that check is probably not a good idea. And then yeah, you've got this weird pawn structure. Black still does have a lot of play on the queen side. White has to deal with this d pawn, which is a bit overextended. He's going to have to play c4 at some point. You probably should play it straight away. He played c3, and then c5 was played, and then he played c4. Yeah, I think taking en passant is much better. Much better, because then you just get to double his pawns, doubled isolated pawns in the center. These doubled isolated pawns in the center can be fine if there are lots of pieces on the board, because they occupy a lot of center squares. But as you can see, most of the pieces are gone, they're swapped off. This is just a better position for white. He's got 2 versus 1 on the queen side, which means he can create a passed pawn. And black's extra pawn is in the center, blockaded by a white pawn. He can't create an extra passed pawn. This is really good for white. So after c5 was played, yeah, taking en passant is just great, and then just ripping this pawn off. I really like that. Black's almost better off not taking the pawn back and just castling or something, or playing rook b8 or something and trying to harass this pawn. So after c4, that just blocks the position up completely and leads to an incredibly strange pawn structure. I mean, look at this. How do you get into something like this? This is absurd. You got these 4 pawns in a diamond shape here, and 3 white pawns here, and I mean, it looks good for black. Black can put a lot of pressure down this half-open b file, and white's pressure down the half-open e file does nothing because this pawn is protected. Black doesn't even have to play that way. He can instead use his big mass of pawns in the center to eventually go for some sort of f5, e4 big push in the center. And once this pawn has been traded off, here's a connected passed pawn right now. So black has got an amazing position. I'm really loving this. Black's a lot of options. I don't see what white can do here. What's white's options? I mean, maybe if he can get b4 in, b3, a3, and then b4, he might actually be able to, threaten to trade this pawn, get rid of this, and get a connected passed pawn of his own, and just defend the center with f3. That'd be white's only chance, but that's a lot of moves, and black has more than enough time to put enormous pressure on b4 and stop that plan in its tracks. So that's how I would play it if I was black. I would start by putting enormous pressure on the b4 square with rooks and things, so that white has no plan, and then maybe switch to the king side later on, after castling, of course, going for something like f5 and e4 and trying to crash through the center. Okay, so black castled, yeah, that's good. b3, yeah, I mean, if you can get in a3 and b4, you're actually doing okay. Okay, a5, that stops b4 in its tracks. Now, something like a3 is probably needed here. With the idea of trying to get this queen here and maybe double the rooks behind the b pawn and going b4 and trying to get that b4 push in. Instead, he played a4, and this is clearly bad. This is clearly really, really bad for white. His one way of making progress, his one plan in the position, he's just ruined with this one move. Not only that, he's given black a permanent outpost on b4 for rooks to sit for the rest of the game, or a queen to infiltrate and get into the position. And he's given himself a backward pawn, which he has to sit there playing nursemaid to with his queen and rooks, because there's going to be a lot of firepower. Well, there should be a lot of firepower coming down this file. This just ruined white's position and gave him no chance at all. Only black can win this now, and white's in pure defense mode. Not only that, black has got the quite clear-cut a4 way to pry open the position at just the right time. Once he's got his rooks menacing this b pawn, he can then look to go a4. So a4 was played. Yeah, so that was if a4 wasn't going to be played. Yeah. So let's move on. a4 was played, ruining white's position. Rook a b8. Yeah, that's good. Rook b1, so white's just defending this pawn. Rook b4, chucking it in the outpost, really good. White's really got to do something, like play f4 or something, try and create some play somewhere. Queen c2. It looks like white's just playing pure defense at the moment. I'm just going to put my phone under my... There we go. No more dings. Here we go. Queen f5. Queen f5. Does queen want to be there? Why not double? Let's just keep piling the pressure on. Let's just then play rook rook up here or something and get the queen. Let's triple on that pawn. Instead he's played queen f5, which is probably the square this pawn wants to sit on. Black has to be careful though not to play this too soon, because it might be answered with an immediate f4 if it does, and you can't play e4 because the queen is defending that square. So you know, maybe rook e8 or something, and you know, and that way you, yeah. I really do think f4 needs to be played by white. I think it really has to be played. So what happened? Queen f5. I guess that stops f4. You know, maybe even g5. That stops f4 as well. So just stop f4, stop white's plan, and then you can start looking at a plan that involves rook e8, f5, and then e4 and crashing through the center. Hey, queen f5, rook f e1. Why is that rook moving? This rook wants to stay here. f4 needs to be played. It's hard though. Maybe f3, then g3, and then f4. It doesn't look like he's going to get it in. So rook f e1, rook e8. So it looks like black is playing with a good plan. He's trying to get this e4 advance in. He's going to have to play something like queen back here, and then f5. Or maybe he wants to keep the queen defending f4. Play something like queen g4, and then f5, and then go for this. So queen d1 was played. Okay, the queen's no longer defending e4, unfortunately. That actually allows e4, and black played it as well. I'm not sure if it's a good idea to play it. I would prefer to have this pawn here when you play it, so that if it's captured, you take back with a pawn and have two united passed pawns rushing through the center. It's just very, very strong. e4 doesn't look too bad, but it's probably a bit early. You're not even threatening to take this pawn because of this pin here. The rook is pinning the rook to, pinning the pawn to the rook. You know, something like king here. See, I think black has played this e4 advance too soon. I think you can better prepare it. It's a great plan. You just got to make sure when you do come up with a great plan and your opponent is just sitting there defending passively, that you get everything into its ideal position first. Make sure the rook is defended so there's no pin. Get your pawn in position. Get the queen into the ideal square. Then play e4 when you're ready at the right time. I don't think white has any way to organize a defense against that. Okay, so e4, playing it a bit too soon, I think, is let white off the hook a bit. White's got a few choices here. White chose rook b2, which is not what I would have done. The main worry is stopping something like f3. So maybe queen d2. Does that stop it? Yeah, it does. Queen d2 stops e3 straight away. So that's probably the move that should have been played here. He played rook b2, which, you know, defends f2, but it doesn't stop the main threat, which is e3. And that's really good that black has played this. He's now threatening to take the pawn with check, so that there's now, you know, stuff coming. You know, the pin isn't an issue. So white was clever and got out of the check. Well, played a clever idea anyway. I don't know if the move was all that clever, but clever idea of moving the king out so there's no check anymore. So if this pawn ever tries to take this pawn, this rook takes this rook. Probably I think a better way to do this would be to play rook f1, because then you're threatening just to take with a discovered attack on the queen, and that'll cause black a few problems. Maybe he'll have to move his queen, get his queen. I'm not sure where he wants to go. Maybe g6, g5, even e5 is interesting. But get the queen off that f file so that white's no longer threatening to take here anymore. But white tried king f1, so there's no check anymore. Clever idea. However, I think something like rook e5, because there's no rush for black to do anything here. This pawn is now pinned, so you're not even threatening to take on e3 anymore and give black an overextended pawn. He just plays simply rook e5, which keeps the rook defended, and then you know, he can play this as slowly as he wants, actually. You know, white might be forced to push past or something and just try and block the position up and defend like crazy. Here though, black did something which kind of just ruined the game. He took this amazing great position where he's slowly been making progress, planning brilliantly, and just ruined it all with one move. He took the pawn. It's not check. So white just went and grabbed a free rook, and now this game's over. You know, now this falls, and the rest of the moves are kind of not important. I mean, White decided to go back and play defensively here. You can play passively and defensively and reorganize and approach this safely. Though I can't help but feel that there might be a better way to play this. This queen wants to defend this pawn. I can see why he played it, but what about just doubling on the e-file? You know, and then you can get your rook on the 7th rank, and then you know start trying to munch on these pawns here. I don't understand why this rook would, which is well placed, want to move out of there. You know, ideally you want to get your queen to here, but this pawn falling apart is a problem. But the idea of getting the queen there is to try and get a check here and use your active pieces. The problem is you don't want rook checks and stuff happening down the back line. So anyway, rook e2 was played, f5. Let's just, whoa, what are you doing? Where are you going? Okay, so why not chuck the rook in e6? You know, your opponent's just created a giant gaping outpost there for your rook to sit. That's just amazing. You know, you can use this rook if you want to yeah, you can use this rook if you want to defend the b pawn, and then your queen can, you know, can come out to here and then here and try and win this thing. So you've got a lot of options here once you get your rook to an active position. This is making a rook passive. Not that it matters, white is a rook up, but still, it's, you know, it's sort of tying yourself up in a knot unnecessarily. So g6 is played now, and then rook fe2. Well, yeah, the rook doesn't want to be on the f file anymore with this pawn defended. Rook b8. Now queen e1. That's a really good move. I like that. That's just great. You know, threatening this move here. This is a massive problem. It also teaches, well, not teaches, but you know, it takes advantage of the fact that black has pushed these pawns up and exposed his king along the 7th rank. Now black has to play a move like rook b7 if he wants to, you know, just to stop this threat here. But you know, the rook can then infiltrate, and the queen can follow it up, and you're either going to swap all the pieces off and have just a winning position, or you're going to mate this king. Instead, white just stole a pawn. It's winning. It's still fine. There's no point in looking at this. So wait, queen takes a5, queen f7. There's not much black can actually do. b4. Yeah, so white's gone queenside. g5. So good stuff from Pranav here. He's trying to develop play. He's a rook down, but he's not giving up, and he's charging these kingside pawns at the board. Maybe his plan is to try and swap some of these pawns up and expose his king, and that's exactly how you should play when you're losing horribly. Okay, b takes. Yeah, you've got to keep your rook alive. So just thinking about it a little bit more. My computer's locked up, unfortunately. There we go. Instead of g5, maybe getting this rook out of the line of sight of this rook would be the way to go. You know, so like rook a7. Let's just hit the queen, and you know, once the queen moves, then we go for this g5 idea, and try and open up this king. Unfortunately, g5, as much as I love the idea, it just fails tactically because he just takes here, and if you move your rook, then this falls. Maybe you got rook d7. I don't know, but c6 is just, you know, pretty bad. You've got stuff like this happening. According to this, queen takes c7 is winning, which is quite hilarious because you just trade the rook for the queen and then get it back again, and then you queen a pawn, and it's an easy win. Okay, anyway, so black decided to take here. Rook takes b2, and then just throw caution to the wind. Let's get our queen in there. Let's jam our queen in there and try and get some sort of perpetual check. Unfortunately, black's king is too exposed. After queen c7 check, the king has to go to g6, but even that loses as well. So the king went to h8, and then the rook went to b8, and then after queen e8, rook takes. There's checkmate. It's amazing how quickly the position fell apart once that b file's open and rooks just came rushing in. Okay, so yeah, it's kind of it was a really good game right up into the point where black just blundered a rook. Just rook gone, goodbye, and then the whole thing just fell apart. And yeah, it was a really good good example of a planning game. You don't get these very often. Most games are decided by tactics like pins. Like, this game was decided by a simple pin, basically. But right up until that point, there was some pretty awesome planning going on. And I think a lot can be learnt looking at this game and looking at the plans and counter plans for both sides. Okay, that's about it for this game. Thanks for listening. I hope people learned something. See you later.